Right. Okay, so this may seem like a very elementary question, but can you explain what a witch is? I think there's a lot of misconceptions about this word witch. It brings negative connotations, black capes, pointy hats, cauldrons and spells. What is a witch?
Okay, so I'll explain sort of what Wicca is. So Wicca, like I said, is well, I didn't say this before, but Wicca is an individualized, spiritually based faith that centers around Mother Nature. So we believe in the miracles of nature. We believe in um, ultimately respecting and not destroying the earth. Um, for example, stop depleting natural resources, which is also something that I'm really heavy into. But Wicca is a new religion. It's sort of from the 1950s, but it's under the umbrella of paganism, which also has a lot of other different sub-religions, but it's polytheistic, meaning that we believe in more than one god or goddess. We believe in the duality of deity, which are gods and goddesses. So we can, like other non-traditional religions, we know that there's a higher power, and we also call it different names. I know that traditional religions believe in God and Jesus, but we believe more in the energy and a lot of Greek mythology as well. But there's no one true form of Wicca, which is why it's individualized. There are covens and sects that practice different theologies. They have different books of shadows, which are rituals. We don't practice all the same thing. And because it's non-traditional, there's no sort of one true form. There's no governing agency. There's no spiritual leaders or recognized prophets. It's
Mhm.
really just it's centered around it's centered around earth, it's centered around nature. But I not all pagans are Wiccans, not all Wiccans are witches, and not all not all of those areas practice witchcraft. So
Mm.
yeah, it's it's just it's just very different. You don't there Like I said, there is no one true form at all.
Right. So
Um,
you are a practicing Wiccan, correct?
I am, yeah. So I'll harness if I'm going to do magic, for example, I will harness the earth's natural energies, which are like um, crystals, herbs, candles, which, beeswax, and then the elements to affect any to change. So I will use the lunar phases, like certain moons are, for me personally, and I am talking about personally, are more powerful than others. But that doesn't mean that if it's not a full moon, I'm not going to go practice magic. I will. There's different energies that affect change for me. And then,
But hang on, when you say practice magic, what does that actually mean? Like you're talking to
oh,
the spirits, what are you
yes.
doing?
Okay. So if for example, I am looking for a sign, and I have something very specific in mind, I will light a candle for myself. I will usually light incense because, I do sage, which means I cleanse my area of any negative energy. If I bring in negative energy, if it's my own negative energy, I make sure I get rid of that. And I will just focus on what my question is, and I will repeat it. And repetition is very good with this as well, by the way,
Hmm.
uh, so that I can look for signs. So if I am asking a for an answer on a direct question, once I'm done and I thank who I'm talking to, then I usually get my signs within a day.
Wow.
The spell work also, will include certain herbs if you want to use herbs. But I think I mainly do sort of my average thing would be that I do I would say candle work more than anything, and crystals, obviously crystals.
But are people coming to you and hiring you to do readings or things, or this is just something you do within your own personal life?
Yeah, I see. I think this is for me again personally. Everybody operates differently. I know of an incredibly talented witch that reads cards. I That's not something that I do. If I have friends of mine that are, need some help, I definitely will help them. But I don't, it's not a service that I offer.
Right. So people aren't coming to you and saying, "Can you call upon my, dead parent or whatever? Can we have a conversation?" Or, "I just met somebody. Can you put a spell on them to make them fall madly in love with me?" They're not conjuring.
Yeah, no, they are asking me
Oh, they
that.
are.
Definitely. I even have people that, DM me on Instagram asking me to do things. I mean, if there's something that, if I read, and I have done it, if I read a DM from somebody that's in a situation, I don't necessarily have to do candle work, but I can try to tap into their energy and create movement for them if they're.
Do you believe that? I've heard people say before, like like a spell was put on you, years ago before you were even born. I don't really know what
Oh,
that means. And you're reliving the same problem or same path until that spell gets broken. Is that a real thing?
I mean, yeah, it's definitely a real thing. I don't know how common it is anymore because I really don't come across that. I definitely do believe in what would be called a curse.
Curse, right.
Yeah,
You do believe that. Okay.
oh yeah, I do. I definitely do. I
And it's
think,
not like what we see in the movies where somebody takes a little voodoo doll and hits it with needles. Is it a bigger deal than that?
I mean, there's that too.
There is? Oh my God.
Well, there's different religions as well, as I mean, I have made effigies out of wax before when I was younger.
Oh my gosh.
I know. But no, I think what I've sort of, I've seen a lot of these um movies on magic or witches or whatnot, and some of
Yeah.
them are like, oh fuck this shit. I'm like, I'm not. It irks me because it's just I feel like it's taking the piss out of something that should be protected. But then if you're dealing with dark magic, and by the way, that could be the same thing said about Christianity, because if you invert the cross, you're inviting something negative in. That's with any religion across the board, traditional, non-traditional. There is good and there's bad.
Right. I agree with that. Well, that was the next thing I was going to ask you, because another thing that's often misunderstood, it's like centuries of stereotypes and fears, I think, that has been conjured up. I think people associate witches with secrecy, and it's not necessarily, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just talking here, but it's not necessarily secrecy from what you guys are hiding. It's more that in the olden days, people thought you were a witch and they would stone you to death. So you would want to keep secret your beliefs, I would think. But I think there's a stereotype that goes along with people who are practicing Wiccans or witches or pagans are secretive people. And I don't necessarily know that that's the case for what the reason is that they think it is.
No, it's not for the reason that they think it is. It's literally self-preservation.
Mm,
Anytime, even you go back to the 1600s, women that were healers, and they weren't witches, but they were healers. They were considered witches because they had an ability to heal somebody. That was a gift. It wasn't that they were practicing witch, but they also, connected with the earth and nature, and they used certain herbs to use as remedies. No, the secrecy was because of for example, the Salem witch trials.
yeah.
And I also think, and this is something that, I am all about the feminine. And I think anytime, and especially if you talk about centuries and centuries ago, anytime a woman displayed any sort of power, it threatened a man who was in power.
Mm,
And I think it was a way of silencing. I think it was a way of taking away their power from having a voice. But secrecy, you know, me growing up, for example, I wasn't overtly talking about what I believed in because there was a stigma attached to it.
Right.
And I had already experienced that as a kid. I'd watched my grandmother. I mean, people were afraid of my grandmother, but I, you know, the secrecy was to protect oneself
Yeah.
from persecution. And
Earlier, oh, go ahead.
sorry, and for me, it's not something, you know, that I spoke openly about, but anybody that was close to me knew what I did, but it wasn't like I was, you know, blowing my trumpet to announce what I was doing because you don't want to encourage any sort of negative attack.
Sure. Of course. Um, Earlier you mentioned that sometimes when you were younger, you had to hide to witness some of the things that your grandmother was doing. Can you tell us a little bit like the stuff that she would do or why she was intimidating to people?
Well, I think um I think with my grandmother, she recognized how powerful she was. She did have people that would ask her to do spell work for her. Definitely. I would sometimes peek in where or sort of like through the crack of a door to see what she was doing. Um, but it wasn't something that she spoke out about either, not even with me or my mum. It was just understood. It was not something that we came together, you know, on certain seasons or solstice or equinox. She was private about it.
Right.
I am too, you know, I mean, yes, now I've had the platform of Housewives, um, I'm okay to talk about it, but before that, I didn't, you know, I just was used to protecting it.
Sure.
It's sacred to me.
I'm curious about the rituals and the spells. Again, the stigma is that witches are sitting around with black hats and stirring a hot pot, a hot cauldron, and speaking into it. What is the reality of creating spells or rituals?
The reality is that we're doing that to affect a change, a needed change, a positive change. If we're just talking about Wicca right now, so
Mhm.
it's a way to connect with the natural energies that are around us, to align yourself with them, tap into them, and ultimately ask permission to borrow it because everything around us with nature is vibration. So that's so are we. So that's how we connect. Like even just yeah, animals, plants, you name it. We tap into that energy to affect a needed change.